new creation in Christ has self-control. That is, he has control over his desires. Say with me very loud, I have control. I'm not hearing you. I have control over what I want. I have control over what I desire. I have control over my passions. So he's saying here that there is a characteristic of a believer in Christ that makes him control what he wants. There's a characteristic of a believer in Christ that makes him control his wants. Don't forget, it's not control over others. It's control over what you want. When you lose control where you should have control, you're walking in the flesh. In other words, you're putting your cravings under government. You're putting your cravings under government. Proverbs chapter 25, Solomon gives us something. Proverbs 25:28. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. I want to read it again. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. That word there has to do with desire. It describes a man without control, because it was city oftentimes used for a man in the Bible, a man's life. So he said, he that has no rule, when you lose control, it results in anarchy. When you lose control, it results in lawlessness. Some people just do what they like. Very evil people. They just kidnap people, kill them, and waste them. When a believer doesn't have control over his desires, when all your desires are expressing themselves, it's like terrorism taking place in your life. Fulani headsmen let loose, expressing itself in your desires, your appetites, and your wants. When a man does not have self-control, he runs wild. So that means his desires begin to control him. He's not the one controlling his desires. What he wants begins to control him. I mean, if he wants food, you know, there's nothing wrong with food. But this man, if he wants food, he wants food. And that desire for food starts controlling him. So when he finds somebody's money, he takes anything to give him food. He can't endure. He must have food now when he wants food. So he's not in control of his appetite. His appetite is driving him. That's not the spirit that you are. He's like a city without walls. He's broken down. Then everything in his life now is in a state of anarchy because he just wants to eat. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 25. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Oh, I love this. Now, they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. Brother Paul is saying, every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. Paul seems to teach here that self-control will determine your reward in heaven. Self-control. That's what Paul seems to be teaching here. And you will see it as we go further. Self-control will determine your reward in heaven. And that's instructive. Mastery is temperance. Mastery is temperance. That's what it means. That is, you will have rule over yourself. That is, at every point in time, you are in charge of what you want. What you want is not in charge of you. That is, what you want and what you desire are under control. Also, self-control means to delay. To delay immediate gratification. To say not now, later. That's self-control. Just like sex. You can say sex, not now, later. Yeah. Not now. For me, sex, not now, later, when I get married. So you delay the urge for sex and you keep it for the right time. That's self-control. Delaying immediate gratification for a more noble cause. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, you go there and study the list of things Brother Paul listed. He listed things like marriage. He listed things like money. He listed things like pleasure. What he should have taken from his church. He said, look, I control myself. Brother Paul, he said, I control myself from money, from marriage, from pleasure. I control myself from legitimate things. Marriage is legitimate. Money is legitimate. Pleasure is legitimate. But Brother Paul said, I control myself from them. Why? Because if you allow legitimate things to dictate things to you, then you will be walking in the flesh. They are legitimate. But if they control you, you'll be walking in the flesh. No matter how legitimate what you want is, it must never control you. No matter. There are times you wake up in the morning, you know you should eat breakfast today. And you have every right to eat breakfast. You say, I will eat breakfast. I'll eat at 2 o'clock. I'm not fasting, but I'll eat at 2 o'clock. You know you need the food. You should eat. But you deliberately deny yourself that gratification for that moment for a later time is part of training. It's not every time your stomach is doing, you start running, I must eat now. If I don't eat now, I will. No, you don't have self-control. And because it is showing in how you pursue food, it will show in sex, it will show in stealing, it will show in lying, it will show in other areas. Because once you lose control in one area, if you are not careful, you lose control everywhere.